Hello, my name is Silvester Henderson, and as many of you know, I am the CEO of Professor for Life Incorporated, and I am so excited on the 27th of January 2025 to interview a real dear friend of mine, Dr. Linc Johnson. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Johnson, please, could you introduce yourself to our digital media academic world?
Well, I'm Dr. Linc Johnson. I'm a visiting assistant professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Okay. And where did you grow up, Dr. Johnson? And kind of share your journey, and where did you attend college, and what was your majors and all those good things?
Okay, I grew up in the famed Compton, California. Right at the right time. I was a teenager when it became world famous from one hip hop group. But I grew up in Compton. I was very fortunate. My mom was like a pillar of the community in the city of Compton. She worked for the school district for 41 years, same school district, and she promoted from teacher assistant to assistant superintendent in those 41 years. And so I grew up with her and my father in what I always like to call middle class in the hood. So, I grew up right across the street from a park. I had three older sisters, or have three older sisters. So we could talk about that trauma later.
Okay. Wow.
But in general, I had a great upbringing, good family. My parents would, I have this addiction to traveling now because my parents would pack us into a big yellow station wagon and during the summers take us all around North America, man, including Mexico and Canada. And I went to Montreal when I was 4 years old to the Olympics, and I just got a lot of good experiences and exposure from my upbringing.
Wow. You know what? I'm so glad, brother, that we had a chance to meet some years ago. Can you describe your work and obligations as a special education professor at the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, and also describe your past work where you worked as a professor and instructor in the California Correctional Facility? Because a lot of people don't even think in terms of, a lot of the prisons, especially in California, have education programs, and that's an option for finding employment. And I would like you to kind of expound, which one did you prefer? Did you like working more for the correctional facility in terms of teaching? And if so, why? Or kind of talk about the differences for us.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. I never thought about being a professor until I was in college. I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, and I got my my BA in English. And during that time, I was dating a young lady, and she mentioned one time, it might have been more than once, but it wasn't that many times, that she wanted to be an English professor. And right then, it just kind of planted a seed that is what I wanted to do. So I started my career out very young. I come from a family full of teachers. I never thought I would be a teacher, but ended up becoming a regular high school teacher at 22, and then it took me some time to get into the college because I would apply and never get anything. So what I did to get into the teaching college was I started working in the computer lab. I applied to be a tutor in the computer lab, after I had already had my BA and my master's degree. And so I was sitting there tutoring in the lab for, a few dollars an hour. And the director of the lab was like, "What are you doing in here with a master's degree?" Well, I just wanted to work at the college. And so she referred me to the chair of English that got me into the English department at that college. But then I moved over to another college. That was Compton College. And then I moved over I got a full-time position. Another professor referred me to the chair of English at Los Angeles Southwest College. And that's where I worked in English for 17 years, teaching English one-on-one, generally on Saturdays. Most of that time I was teaching either late night or Saturdays because I always had other jobs. And I just love it. Teaching, being a professor is my favorite job ever. So that answers one of those questions. Being a professor is something I would do for absolutely free. I absolutely love it. At UNLV, I'm teaching special education courses within the early childhood, multilingual, and special education department. So I work with people that are working to get their teacher licenses, our masters, our doctorate in in special education, or BA or whatever. So all those things. Most of the classes I teach, which is great for me because it just really focuses me in on this idea of special education, are the legal aspects. So I teach a legal aspects class for the people getting their bachelor degrees are on that level, 400 level. And then I teach a legal aspects class at the 700 level, 786, which is the doctorate level. So those are my favorite classes to teach. They're really dry, but you know my personality. So I try to bring some life into it. I try to bring some life experience into it so that the students can understand the importance of following the law in education.
Wow.
Inside the prison. So that's a loaded question about the prison. And we've had conversations about this, but I'll let the digital world know.
Okay.
For me, growing up in Compton, I would see people get out of prison and they would be domestic terrorists. So growing up, that's what I remember. We'd say things like, you know, lunatic is getting out of prison in May. You know, I'm not coming outside after May, right? I'll see y'all when he go back or whatever, right? And so, of course, we didn't call him lunatic because he was a nice, upstanding gentleman who was rehabilitated by the system. So how I got into the system, I told you I started my career at 22. And most of that was because I spent a whole lot of my time being a class clown in school. So I really didn't learn anything. And I ended up going to Morehouse College, where these guys were like the top 5% of their class, really serious about school, came from successful, established families that, you know, it just really showed me how much of a gap there was between my education and their education. And no full fault or accountability on the teachers or the school district in Compton, because I didn't take it seriously either. So we both played a role in that miseducation and undereducation happening. And so I decided that first semester at Morehouse, I had to teach myself the high school curriculum all over again, because the professors were using terms that I had never heard before, like writing a prospectus for a research paper. Well, I probably wrote 1 or 2 research papers in my whole high school, and I definitely didn't write a prospectus. I didn't write a first draft, and I probably plagiarized the whole thing and copy and pasted things out of this is before computers got real big. Copy and typed stuff straight out of the encyclopedia. But I was really threatened by that. So I started getting gray hair, man, and worrying. My teachers and friends had told me that I was going to fail out of Morehouse and end up back there. So anyway, I worked really hard to not make that happen. I didn't want to end up back in Compton. So I taught myself the high school curriculum, and then I decided I'm going to go back into my neighborhood and I'm going to teach people to take their education seriously, because I didn't want anybody to end up in a situation like me in a very prestigious place, but feel like the dumbest person there. So moving forward from that, once I started working in schools, I wanted to seek out like the worst off students. So I would literally I worked at Locke High School for 2 years, and it's because one day I was watching TV and they're like, there's a race riot at Locke High School. And it just intrigued me for like a whole week. Like, how are they rioting at school, but then their neighbors in the neighborhood? And I grew up near that neighborhood. So I don't hear about any riots going on in the neighborhood. So why are they rioting at school? I need to work there and figure this out. So I would go work there, a couple years and bring them into compliance in their special education programs and stuff. So I spent that time hopping around, man, and doing that, going from school to school in different districts to find the worst off students. Well, I ended up finding the worst off students at the California Youth Authority. They were recruiting me heavily to come in. They were under some lawsuits. They needed somebody to come in that had a behavior background that could also help with bringing them into compliance for their special education programs. So I started working there, and at that point, I think I had taught maybe 13, 14 years of special education and really had this expertise in the whole field. And this was the first time that I feel like I really taught special education, because now I have students diagnosed with schizophrenia, oppositional defiance disorder, autism, and all these things that before I was working with usually students with bad behavior. And so mostly it was just behavior things. It was behavioral. It wasn't actual things that needed accommodations. They actually needed accommodations for the most part. There were a few, but when I got to the youth authority, I realized like, oh no, I'm really teaching special education here, and so I was doing that. And as fate would have it, my principal walked in one day and said, man, you're helping these kids 12 at a time. You need to promote to the adult side and help them 1,200 at a time. And my ego loved how he phrased that. So I applied and I started working at Centinela State Prison as a supervisor of academic instruction. And many people watching this will not know me personally, but just know that once I got there and I got inside the system and I got a bird's eye view of what's going on inside the system, I'm going to phrase it like this, even though this is not exactly how it happened. I took over the school. The principal, 6 months later, the principal was gone. I became the acting principal, our correctional supervisor of correctional education programs is what they call it in the system. Immediately, what I started doing was working with the local college, which down there it's Imperial Valley College. And so I started working with people at Imperial Valley College. We created a group, a cohort of people who were hell-bent on bringing college into the prisons. Now, at the time, Senate Bill 1391, the California bill that allows colleges to come into prison and get money off of it, get funds from it, that didn't exist. There was talk about it. They had a big Hollywood producer was working on it with the governor and all that stuff. But we were spearheading this thing, whether that passed or not. We were going to do that. Because one of the things that I noticed is when I went into prisons, I always thought of the people that I grew up with and them making dumb decisions. So I thought of people in prison as these people that make dumb decisions and they do the dumbest things and pretty much they're just dumb, right? But when I got there, I realized that these dudes are not dumb. Some of them are able to run criminal enterprises. Some of them were able to do crimes and then leave the country and be on their own devices until their friend ratted them out or whatever. So these dudes are not dumb. They're using like CEO level strategies to do bad things. Instead of using those skills to be superheroes, they're being supervillains. And so we just need to change that. And what's the difference between them and me? Well, I grew up with a couple of great parents in a great situation and environment, but really the only difference was, because my fingerprints ain't clean, the only difference was I have an education. So by the time a job realizes that my fingerprints aren't clean, they also are impressed by my doctorate and all my credentials and all my other degrees and accomplishments that I made. So how do we get these dudes to have that working for them? And so that was my mission.
Wow.
So SB 1391 gets signed. We bring the college, Imperial Valley College, into Centinela State Prison. But because of some things that I was going through, I wanted to be closer to my daughter. I transferred to California City that had Cerro Coso in there. And then, of course, started working for Cerro Coso, teaching English classes inside California City Correctional Facility. And might I add, I want to put this out to the world because nobody else will ever tell you that I broke records for 2 years in a row for the number of GEDs that any prison in California had earned, because those guys wanted to go to the college program, because I had 40% of that prison in college. 1,000 students were going to college between Cerro Coso and the other options that were available to them. We were running 42 to 45 classes a semester at our height of the program.
Wow. And yeah. You know what? You said something so significant. First of all, I want to just say I was so impressed when I met you. I think I met you back around 2019 or 20. Mm-hmm. We met because I came to visit a California City Correctional Facility. Yeah. Prison. And I remember when I came, I was like, wow. I was a little afraid. I was a little afraid at first because I wanted. It has that effect on you. I wanted to make sure when I got into prison that they realized I wasn't a prisoner. I didn't want them to confuse me as a prisoner. For sure. But I remember being very much in awe by your overall presence and your personality, and I could tell that the students, inmates, had a lot of respect for you. I could just tell. And I was like, this young man, this brother, these prisoners really, really like him.
Yeah.
And I could tell, when sometimes you see, and you had a very large fraction, I would say, of African American and Latino prisoners at that college. But I can tell that around you, whatever you did for them, you gave them a sense of value.
Yeah, for sure.
And you gave them a sense of feeling like, even though they were in a concentrated area because of a crime, or whether they did it or not did it, I don't know. They had a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you said that really sticks out to me, Dr. Johnson, is that the difference between the person in prison and the person that's not in prison is only one thing. The person that's not in prison just chose to use their skills in a way that was very effective through American standards, and having dealt with that, really, after meeting you, I just became really intrigued as we became closer. I became really intrigued with prison and prison education. And because I didn't know anything about prison education, and I came there as a representative from the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. So I commend you on all the work that you've done to help so many of the young men that were involved, and just young people in general in there. Let me ask you.
I wasn't gonna work in the prison. It just so happenstance. It's funny how fate works, right? I moved my young family to one of my family's condos in Tehachapi, where there's a prison. And they would see me back then. I was young. I owned, this bright red orange Mustang, the Hot Wheels version. So they would see me speeding out of there at 4:30 in the morning, going to drive down to the hood to work. And my commute then was like 2.5 hours each way. And so they'd see me at the time that they were going to the prison. I'd be, speeding around them to get out of the community to go down to the hood to teach. And they would say, you know what, where are you going every early in the morning? I'm going to work. I teach in the hood. I teach special ed in the hood. And they go, it's a school in the prison. I'm like, man, I'm an African-American male in America. I am not volunteering to walk in no prison. And I told them for a couple of years, like, there's no way that I'm going to prison. But it kind of planted a seed so that when the Youth Authority opportunity presented itself, I thought, like, oh, maybe I will do it. I don't want to go in an adult prison and work with the men, or women, but I work with the kids. That was my focus at the time. But then it led to me actually voluntarily walking into prison every day for 10 years. Longer than.
And how was that experience? Have you had an opportunity to? I'm sure you've had opportunities where young inmates that were in there may have graduated or got out of prison, I should say.
Yes.
And that you made an impact in their life, and I'm sure they've contacted you back.
They find social media. They get on social media and they find that at Dr. Linc J, and they are on me, and they'll say, I see their vacations, I see their trials and triumphs. We go through, and I try to keep them connected. I've been doing a bad job recently because I'm kind of 4 years post the prison, but we used to connect with each other at least once or twice every few months, and then I would connect them to each other so they could be a support group, because I don't really know what it's like. I do know that they always think they're ready to get out and move on, but they don't realize how out has changed. And then fortunately, they have a lot of family members that say, oh, I'll give you this car, you could live with me, or blah, blah, blah. And then you go there and they're behind on their rent, or the car doesn't work. And so there's just a setback. So I would try to tell them, like, no, you got to be ready to step on your own 2 feet when you get out. Don't rely on anybody else. Cool if your grandmother gives you a car and it works and none of the rest of the family get mad or want to take it from you or sabotage that actually happening, then good. But don't go out preparing for that. And something that you asked, man, I had to adjust to walking into these correctional facilities. I'm used to having all my, faculties and devices with me, but when you work in a prison, it's so much that you got to leave behind that you're used to having with yourself all the time, and you're walking into place that's safe and secure, but I'm not part of that safety and security. I am part of interacting closely with the inmates inside a correctional facility. So at the very beginning, I had a hard time, and I was late every day. I don't even know how I kept that job, because I would sit in the car and debate every morning for about 8 weeks of time. Like, wow. What am I doing? Are you really about to do this? Like, is this really happening, right? And then there were challenges in there, behavioral things and things that I had to adjust to having to do. So in my normal class, when I worked with behavioral students, I generally managed the behavior. In those classrooms, you got to call a cop, and I don't know where you grew up or where I grew up. And to this day, I don't call the police unless it's life or death, right? If that's the decision I'm making, then I'm going to dial 911 to get the police there, because in my experience, calling the police always made a situation worse. Because I've seen the police attack the person that called them. I've seen the police attack everybody, when they pull up. And so I'm just real cautious about calling the police. So I had to get over that too as well. Like, every time something happens, the expectation is that I'm going to call the police, and I want to handle it, but this is their house. So now I have to do that. And so, you know me, so I have a little bit of a problem with authority too. So I didn't always bow down to their authority over me, right? You have authority over the people that live here and that you have authority with, but you don't have authority over me. So we butted heads, man. I was in the belly of the beast. It was a tough job. It's one of my most rewarding jobs, but it was the hardest job to walk into every day.
Wow. Yeah. You know what? Have you seen were the students in your correctional classroom different than your students in your typical university or college classroom? Or you found that the learning or the challenges that they had were pretty much equal?
Yeah, no, man. I used to tell them in there, if they weren't wearing those blue jumpsuits, I would assume that they were just regular college students. And that's something they had never heard. That's a compliment that they had never heard. But I would tell them, and I taught speech, I taught English 101, Shakespeare, all the English classes. And I would tell those dudes, I can't tell the difference. Only thing I know, we're in prison because y'all are all wearing blue. That's the only difference that I saw with them. But same challenges, same processes that we had to go through. I didn't adjust anything. I brought my college classes and experience. I wrote an English 101 textbook, so I worked with them in my English 101 textbook. I didn't have to do a whole bunch of accommodations or modifications to the curriculum because they got it. And you're talking about a population that still hand writes letters to their loved ones, so they had the writing skills. It was just about fine tuning that. The biggest problem being they didn't have access to technology. The prison system keeps technology out of their hands because they're always afraid of the inmates becoming smarter or stronger than the people that work there. And so I used to also tell them that they are smarter than about 75% of that prison, are more educated. I can't say smarter. I misspoke on that, but they're more educated because most of the people in that prison, even the ones that had to go to college, only had to take 6 units of administration of justice. So if you've taken more than 6 units in college, you're in the upper echelon of the intelligentsia in this prison, right? Because the only other people that are more educated than you are working education, medical, mental health, the libraries, right? Those people have to have some, but everybody else has a high school diploma and maybe 6 units of administration of justice. And there might be 1 or 2, officers that have a BA or an AA or something like that out of 200 or 300, But and I'm being facetious here when I say that, because it could be 5 or 6, right? But I would tell them you have to start acting like it. You're more educated than them, so you can't be getting in little spats with somebody that's less educated than you, right? You have to understand you're now a scholar, so you have to behave like it. And I don't know if you ever seen me walk in and address them, but I would walk in and say, "Good morning, scholars. What's up, scholars?" Right? Because I wanted to hone that into them, that you're getting something now that they can't take away from you. When you get out, you'll have this degree that nobody could ever take away from you. So continue, go back to school, go get a BA. And we helped a lot of students. You mentioned them getting out. I helped a lot of students get into Cal State universities under that Project Rebound program, where they would get right out of prison and go right and stay on campus at Cal State Bakersfield or San Diego State University. And we worked hard to really make that happen and to give them that reality.
What a rewarding life you've had as complete academic. It must be really rewarding for you to work with students have had the opportunity to work with students at so many different levels.
Yeah.
Special ed to grade school to community college to university to adults with learning behavioral problems to adults with legal problems, and still be able to inspire. That's the heart of a good teacher.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I told last year, I just realized and told the world, anybody that would listen, that last year, spring 2023, I had finally taught all the levels of school from kindergarten to doctorate. I've done adult school, I've done continuation school, court schools, community schools, elementary, middle school, high school. So I have literally taught every level of education in this country.
Wow. Please share information about your work as a social advocate for communities of color. What sort of additional things or tasks have you been involved in? Just, your advocacy work for students of color.
Well, I had the great fortune of meeting Dr. Jeff Sapp at the California State University, Dominguez Hills, and he became my instant mentor. And one of the things that he really impressed upon me was that, we got to fight for each other. And Dr. Sapp is a queer white male, totally opposite of each other. But he told me, at that moment, I had like 3 or 4 classes with him, and finishing my special education credential. And he says, we got to fight for each other. We're not really free until my fight is your fight and your fight is my fight. And at the time, I've been working in community. So we could start off with just working in different schools. I've worked in all the hoods of Southern California. So Compton, Watts, South Central. I worked in Wilmington with, predominantly Latino students. I worked in East Hollywood, which is the hood, which predominantly Latino students. So I really spread out the love to as many communities of color as I could, and not stopping myself and going, well, this school is 91% Latino, so I'm not going to work there. I go in there and practice my Spanish with them. And, we started a salsa garden at one of the schools that I worked at to get the parents involved and engaged in working with me and their students in my special education classroom. And so those kind of things. And of course, a lot of volunteering. I always volunteer with AIDS Project Los Angeles. That was one of the assignments in one of Dr. Sapp's classes, where we had to find somewhere to volunteer with. And I don't remember if it was I think it was a little Black girl that I came across, and she was getting help from AIDS Project Los Angeles. And I thought, I should volunteer there, and so I went to volunteer there, and it changed my life because we had these, and this was maybe 20 years ago, we had these preconceived notions about AIDS, and now everybody thinks it's gone, right? That I don't think we take the precautions that we did when I was growing up. But it was so insightful to see the many different types of people struggling to deal with that disease still in the 21st century, right? And so that's one of the stuff that's rewarded. And of course, now I'm a theoretician, so I do a lot of research. My research is globalization, because another thing that I find with our communities is we limit ourselves. We don't think of the world as the world, right? And especially in America. In America, we're so stuck on being Americans and being in America, even though sometimes America doesn't love us the same. So I did this study. I did my dissertation on globalization and identified these 17 indicators of globalization in education. And so what I've done with that is I've adapted it to different situations. So like in the prison system, I took the indicators and I create, because I feel like people in prison, they're so used to being, like, if you think about the projects in LA, they're these small little, square mile of like gates and barbed wire and wrought iron and all of that stuff. And to me, that looks like preparation for prison. That's why some of these guys are so comfortable in prison, because they live in these areas where I'm a gang member, so I can't really take the bus to the beach or to Disneyland, and maybe I don't have the money or funds to do that. So I stay stuck in this area, and this is all I know. Nobody tells me about the rest of the world and things that are going on outside the world. So like with the prison system, what we did was bring people in, let them interact with people from different places, different perspectives. I always would tell my teachers to have a map of the world on the wall. So when I would mention all the places I travel, because I have a travel addiction, I could go point to it on the wall, and you'd hear them say, "Oh man, I wish I can go to Cuba," or I got family from Cuba, or I want to go to the Philippines, or wherever it is, right? And so doing that kind of stuff. Of course, working inside the prison, there's some level of volunteering your time and work. A lot of men coming in. I used to joke that I got 2,500 sons in this prison. Everybody think they my son, even the ones that are older than me. And they'll come in, and it's so many tears and so many stories and so many things, and just really having to work that up. Because, like I said, I went to work in the prisons because I remember what it was like when people would come out of prison and be in Compton, and we'd be afraid, deathly afraid of what they were going to do, or we see them go back and forth and spend half their lives in the system back and forth. And so that leaves holes in the community. And so, that's the one thing I'm most proud of, is that when I got into the prison system, they were touting the recidivism rate, which is the somebody going back to prison within 3 years of being released from prison. It was like 7 out of 10 go back. With these college programs, with the things that we're doing in prison, with the certifications and vocations and all of that stuff, the recidivism rate goes down to like 1.6%, right? So that way now you have these men back in the community, back being parts of their families. Because, in the prison, and this is how I used to get them, I would trigger them emotionally with this. They hate child molesters, right? And they want to beat them up. But all the kids in your neighborhood, you're left. Ain't no men there. Y'all are here. So who's there protecting the children in your neighborhood now, right? So what are you going to do? When you get out, you need to be there and fill that gap that you have for your family. So it's just one of the many challenges that we have. And so here in Vegas, I just work a lot with school-age children, a lot in just writing and English and all those things. So it's a never-ending battle.
How does your advocacy work intertwine and support higher education and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada?
Well, now I've been thinking globally. I had one of my members of my dissertation committee was Dr. Mark Robinson at USC. And what I would have studied had I not met Dr. Robinson was the overrepresentation of African American and Latino males in special education. That was my big passion project, is to stop letting them put us in special education classes because we got behavior issues. Teachers got to deal with behavior. They take classroom management as part of their credential. They need to deal with students that have bad behaviors and stop expecting students to just sit there and sit in rows and be quiet and do what you say, deal with some of the challenges. So that's what I would have studied. But Dr. Robinson opened a whole world to me by asking me, well, that kind of limits your research and what you can do with it. What do you think is the problem? And we started talking about these things, like people not having a global mindset, people coming into communities like mine, like Compton, and teaching, but with a deficit mindset. Oh, these kids can't read. Oh, these kids can't speak English. These kids not gonna make it out the hood, right? And so that's where my research interest started, was how to expand the worldviews of students, right? So even if you get a professor or a teacher that limits you based on some ability or disability that they see, you still won't limit yourself because you have these goals that you need to attain. Like myself, I was a solid C student going to Morehouse, but because people told me I was going to fail out and end up back in Compton, it motivated me to do my absolute very best to not make that happen. And not that I graduated Morehouse with honors. I did not. I did not. But I did. I was successful enough to walk across the stage and graduate on time with my peers.
Wow. Who influenced you to become an academic?
Oh, my mom. I'm a big mama's boy, even to this day. My mom is no longer here. May she rest in peace. And my mother was like this consummate educator, always teaching. If she told you to sweep the floor and you're not doing it in the way that she thought you would do it, she would go through like the 7 steps of a lesson plan. She would show me how to do it, then she would watch me do it. We might do it together, right? And then she assessed and checked for my understanding of what we're going to do the next time. And so not only was she integral in me having a respect for the profession, but that's how I got in. I actually started working in Compton at the district that she was at the time. She was assistant superintendent when I started working there. So I'm pretty sure that, she's probably the reason that I got in, because I know her, and I've tried to explain that to everybody when I started working there, because everybody had these high expectations. Oh my God, Mrs. Johnson's son is working for the district, and they thought I was going to come be the next iteration. No. It's no other her. I can never do as well as she did. And really, as a teacher, I taught in the classroom 17 or 18 years, and I was an administrator for about 10 and a half years. And she told me, like, you're a much better administrator than you are a teacher. That's the one compliment I got from her in all those years. So, and I was glad to get that. I was happy she gave
Your
her.
mom sounds like she was a very important but very astute woman.
Yeah, and the level of compassion and how she would help people. I always complain that my mom helped so many people, just like with advice, financially, pointing them in the right direction, mentorship. I mean, she was always there for people. And I feel like we all really failed her because nobody was there for her. To me, it just felt like, she's made millionaires. People would go, they'd be playing professional basketball. And this is a kid that she poured all her love and care over, drove to practices and did stuff for. She welcomed people into our home. I have people that are like lifelong members of the family now because they would come stay with us, and all of that. She was great with people, and I don't think she ever got that back, but she never expected it. It's just a compassionate, wonderful person. Of course, it's my mom, and I'm a mama's boy, so I'm going to say that. But if other people would say that too, if we could speak to them now.
Well, God rest the wonderful soul of your mom. What are some of your most significant writing accomplishments, Dr. Johnson?
There's a few. I'm really proud of writing my English 101 text, and I have, of course, several journal articles that I've written about globalization. I've written about digital learning and teaching, because I was fortunate before COVID. I started Los Angeles Southwest College would always give you a Canvas shell. In most colleges, when you work, they give you a Canvas shell. I've been working at Los Angeles Southwest since 2005 or 6. I was working with them starting from 2005 or 6, and every semester they throw you a Canvas shell, and I would never use it. But right before COVID, some way I went in and I started building up the class and started having the students, do that. And then of course COVID hit, and boom, all my stuff was all set up, and I was able to transition effectively. So I've written some journal articles about that. Diversity in the workplace, a lot of the issue that I think people have in these educational settings is the lack of diversity, the lack of the ability for people to be engaged with somebody that looks like them. Something that was so important to me. One day I walked on USC's campus and they had a big old 100-foot poster, billboard, whatever you call it, of Dr. Darnell Cole, who was at the time my first and only black male professor that I had at USC. But when I walked on campus and I saw that picture of him on the side of our building where we took classes, it just gave me the sense of belonging. So I write about that idea because, of course, there's an attack now on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging because when you're part of a majority group, you don't understand the importance of that because the majority group usually does the majority of things. And so there's an attack because I think, and this is just me speaking, not speaking for anyone else, I think that there are people in the majority group that have been able to have opportunities without being qualified. And so they look at DEI and belonging opportunities as an opportunity for someone to do something and be unqualified. But we don't necessarily get that. I usually have to be more qualified than other people to get into a position, right? And so I've never had a position where I was not qualified or underqualified to do. I generally was more qualified than I needed to be doing that thing, right? And so it's a shame that there's an attack on it. So I've been doing some research on that as well.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
What challenges have you faced as a man of color in teaching in higher education specifically?
And teaching in higher education has been pretty good. UNLV is fairly diverse. The president here is an African-American male, which I love. And there's a lot of diversity and a lot of affinity groups that you can be a part of to experience diversity at its fullest. And I think that the University of Nevada, Las Vegas really has a good grasp on really what that means to be interactive on campus with different groups and see different perspectives. In the past, of course, I've been offered the worst classes. I have to be in line for classes supposed to be by seniority. I know I got more seniority than half the department, but I'm getting the bottom of the barrel classes and those sorts of things where you could say, well, maybe it's not because I'm African American, but because I'm the only one, maybe it is, right? And so it has been challenging in the academy in that sense, being passed over for opportunities, or being part of, not being asked to be part of committees and those sorts of things. But also there have been opportunities. I was able to work for the Passages program at LA Southwest College, working with the African American Latino males and the athletes, to get them together. But it's just been challenges getting in, going in and interviewing and never getting a yes or anything. All of my jobs in college have come from me connecting with somebody at that college and then expressing an interest to teach there. And then I would get the job. But just filling out an application and sending it, I'm not even getting called or asked to come to an interview with all my expertise, and it could be the perfect job. For instance, and I'm going to put them on blast, Cerro Coso College was doing they wanted to hire somebody, a diversity and equity and inclusion person to work with the college. And when I tell you that not only did I meet all the requirements of the position, I worked with the panel and everything. And I was so upset when that didn't come to fruition because there were 3 candidates. I was placed as number 1 to go speak to the president, and then immediately they said, "Oh, well, we're not filling that position anymore." They got pulled back, and then they reflew to start all over. We got to start all over. We need to get more candidates. It wasn't enough candidates. And I'm pretty sure Cerro Coso is in the middle of nowhere. You're not gonna 3 candidates is a lot for Cerro Coso, right? You're not going to get that much competition for a position. So why refly? And of course, they only got the other 2 people that, because I wasn't doing it again without filing an EEO complaint. But they got the other 2 people to do it and then hired out of those 2, the second or third person. In another cases, I went for 2 jobs, and I'm going to put them on blast too, for California State University, Bakersfield. And I got referred to the president and talked to the president, but he was always concerned about something. He's concerned about my safety because I'm an amputee. And, even as if I hadn't been walking in and out of prisons for 10 years, right? he was concerned for my safety to run their prison programs. And then another job was on campus, and I would have been teaching on campus, and he had another concern. I don't remember what that was, but so those kinds of things. It just, it's hard for the poor to be in America.
My heart goes out to you because as a man of the system for so many years, all three structures, community college, UC, and the CSU, especially in California, there are so many dysfunctions, especially around the hiring of men.
Yeah, and California has this reputation of being super liberal, but I also find that in some of these institutions, they're super discriminatory too, right? Even worse than Nevada is a red state. I walked on this campus and got a job. I talked to Dr. Joseph Morgan here at UNLV and got at least one class based on my expertise and background and experience. But in California, I could spend years trying to compete for positions and not get it. And it could be because I'm Black. It could be because I'm disabled. It could be because my hair is long in a natural style. But that's weird. If you're the most liberal state in the country, you should also be that way in your hiring practices. But when you go to these schools, that's not what you see. You don't see that type of diversity.
The California Higher Education Master Plan, especially the structure of the system, is very discriminatory. But the discrimination is towards black straight men. I hate to say it a lot of times. People don't see it because now, recently, and I hate to say this, but it's the truth. If you look at the majority of colleges in California, they're all being ran by women. And what people tend to do, regardless of whether it's intentional or not, they tend to hire their comfort. And so,
like molecules,
they hire their comfort. I mean, I've had wonderful women who were supervisors of me, so I'm not against having women at the top, but I am against not having enough understanding that you can't have a president, a vice president, 10 deans, all your directors, and they all be females. Or all of it one thing, right? But that's what happens. And then you tell yourself you're diverse. So we got to come back to that, Dr. Johnson, because that's another long discussion. And I have only like 2 more questions because I don't want to keep too much of your time. But I'm so enthralled by your energy and your knowledge. You have trained yourself with so many degrees and so much experience for an African American man. And I think the fact that you have worked in all these capacities with another challenge as an amputee and a disabled person, I think that is also phenomenal, because I think you have not let anything in life stop you.
No.
And so
nothing else, it has propelled me forward.
Tell me, kind of discuss your future goals, your future projects and innovations.
Well, I'm hoping, I still work with the K through 12 crowd, but I'm really hoping to only do that another 3-4 years. And then I would really love to figure out a path into administration at the college level, especially here at UNLV. I really think I found a home here in Nevada in general. And then working at UNLV, I love it. And so I really hope to expand my responsibility here at UNLV. My dream, and I'm gonna claim it right now, is to open the Center for Globalization at UNLV that kicks off my research into the next millennium.
Wow. Well, you speak it into existence.
Yeah, that is my dream.
You know what? You speak it into existence, because I am certain, with a man with your great determination and your knowledge and your passion, that a good friend of mine just recently called God the Great Spirit. And so I'm going to use that in this way and say that I believe that the great spirits are going to bless you, because your heart and your mission is so well. And it's so good. Do you have any final thoughts and ideas you would like to communicate?
Well, I just think, I thank you for the opportunity. And, this is my favorite topic, talking about myself. So any issue doing that. And I just appreciate being able to do that and to say things that maybe I'm not able to say on a regular basis or share with people in general, because, you just kind of keep your head down and do work in the grind. So in a way that has been cathartic for me to go through some of my trials and triumphs,
Wow. Well, Dr. Lincoln Johnson, I want to thank you as the CEO of this podcast entitled Professor for Life Incorporated. I have an opportunity to interview academics and scholars from all over the world, even as far as Great Britain, London I've done. And I've had such a wonderful opportunity to interview business scholars, business professionals, I should say, academic scholars, community college, 4-year state, private, Ivy League. And I'm always enthralled as to the experiences. But one unique principle that you displayed to me throughout this entire interview was your deep love for people and your countless desire to change the lives of humanity. So I want to thank you on behalf of my company for taking the time to share your heart, because it's very rare, to see someone who's had so many opportunities in teaching and also have gone through challenges, but they still have such a wonderful, warm personality. So from my heart to yours, we love you. Thank you. God bless you. And please give a wonderful hug to that beautiful wife of yours.
Yes, I will.
Okay. And thank you once again.
No, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye now.